All right. Welcome, everybody. On time, Albano. I'm going to move that so that way nothing potentially copyright happens over here. All right. This is the UFC 306. We're going to do a little post-show wrap-up show, whatever you want to call it. You know, there's going to be an opportunity this week that we may not be able to do an episode of the MMA Outsiders, so I'm just going to go live right now, share quick thoughts, hopefully no more than half an hour, just discussing everything that was UFC 306, which took place at the Sphere. Obviously, they had a lot of hype around this card. It was only 10 fights total, but they were promoting the hell out of Sphere. They were promoting the hell out of Sean O'Malley and the trilogy fight. And did the event live up basically to the billing is what we are going to talk about. First, let me talk about the aesthetic of the show. I mean, my God. I know Dana White mentioned all the money that he poured into this card and that there's a chance that we're probably not going to see another Sphere show ever again. That being said, you saw the reactions of John Anik, Joe Rogan, and Daniel Cormier. And I mean, if there was an opportunity that we could get a Sphere card again, I think that would be utterly fantastic because honestly, this was a card that I don't know if I can say delivered based on some. There were some pretty entertaining fights, but I mean, look at the Sphere itself. I was very critical in saying, they're focusing so much on the Sphere, focusing so much on the venue, they're not putting any really focus on the fighters themselves. But I mean, it lived up and then some. I think the 6-chapter videos that they did, the history of Mexico and the fighters that come from Mexico was fantastic. It was mesmerizing, the visuals and graphics that they had, and they evolved all throughout the night, especially with the main card, was a sight to behold. I thought the people involved in the production, not just talking about, Dana White, Hunter Campbell. I'm talking about like the behind the scenes people responsible for graphics, people responsible for the videos and such, the people who were editors. They all really delivered. Those behind the scenes graphics and designer people, they all deserve an applause because they really showcased their stuff. Hi, Zain.
Hello, how are you?
All right. I was just talking about the aesthetic and the atmosphere for the Sphere, and just trying to get that off the bat. Just how fantastic and mesmerizing it looked.
Yeah, the production was brilliant. It was everything that I thought it could be, even though I really didn't know what to expect. And every video was breathtaking in its own right. And for those of you who have not seen them, they are on the UFC's YouTube channel right now. So anybody can go on right now and watch all 5 parts, and it was cool. It added a unique element to the night after a preliminary card that looked like from a production standpoint any other UFC, but as I was told by someone a couple weeks ago, very close to kind of everything that was going on, they said that once the main card starts, they wanted the fans to be blown away, and I certainly was blown away. So
Certainly was, yeah. I know. I think it was Luca Fury was kind of saying, how underwhelming it was, and well, that tweet kind of aged like milk from the prelims.
right, for sure. And I mean, the most unique part of the night, outside of the fights themselves, is just the way. And I'm not even Mexican. I know you aren't either, but just the way Mexican history was celebrated. Like I could not
Yeah,
imagine what those people who are part of that heritage and culture were feeling that like their country was celebrated on such a major scale. I thought was pretty cool. And as someone who also watched the Canelo fight, which was going on concurrently during the UFC pay per view, and I hate to say this because Canelo usually owns Mexican Independence Day weekend, but there was more Mexican spirit on the UFC card than there was on the boxing event. And if you would have told me that a year ago, you would have told me that a year ago, 2 years ago, I don't think I would have believed it. But after watching the one and only UFC Sphere event, I think I can say with certainty that that's what the case was. The only disappointing part of the night, I guess, if you're a diehard Mexican combat sports fan, is the fighters from Mexico did not fare very well, going 2-6.
No.
So
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I mean, we'll talk about, where we rank UFC 306 and the uniqueness of it in terms of, the overwhelming amount of, UFC events that we have for the year and ranking those UFC pay-per-views. But Zan, um, unfortunately, for the second time in three pay-per-views, when we do our little post-show poll, um, you know how great, good, fair, met, and poor.
mhm.
Uh, fair met won, about 30% of the votes. Then poor and great were kind of very close, right behind it. Good was just an 18%, and I think the reason for that, we've had debates about, this kind of concept, this kind of idea that your main and your co-main, your title fight or title fight could play a role in making or breaking a pay per view. And unfortunately, I mean, as we'll talk about it now. Merab Dvalishvili, I'll say it. One of the UFC's worst nightmares has happened. Sean O'Malley ends up taking on Merab Dvalishvili, and well, I get to take my victory lap. I said if Sean O'Malley could not handle the wrestling, and he was not able to, then it was going to be an easy night for Merab. Now, I say easy night, and it was a fairly dominant win, but Sean O'Malley did win 2 rounds on 2 judges' scorecards. He clearly won the 5th round, hurting Merab with the front kicks to the
Yeah, I
body.
don't know. I'm a little bit confused by that because I don't know what other round you would give Sean O'Malley in that scenario
Maybe
outside of
third.
round five.
I think the thing is, I had said it when I kind of messaged you. I think the thing is the 3rd round because O'Malley landed the stronger shots, but at the same time, you can say those strong shots came at the end of the round when Nima Marab controlled him for most of the round. And I mean, Zan, even Dana White had to admit it, and the paper was spoiled a little bit for him too. This was probably the worst performance that we've ever seen out of Sean O'Malley.
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, getting taken down 6 times, getting controlled for 3 out of the 5 rounds, potentially four, based on how you had it, and then to not even really go for broke until it was way too late. It was a very non Sean O'Malley like performance, if you will, and just a total letdown from 4 years of pure dominance. He had won, I think it was 5 or 6 in a row going into this fight. He had just come off of a huge, revenge type win against Marlon Vera in April in March, and then well, obviously, it didn't work out for him, and it's an unfortunate thing. And I think what's even more funny, and this is what went viral on Twitter last night. I mean, this is kind of a bit of a dig, from a couple months ago, but there are people that are genuinely disappointed that two primary wrestlers are now UFC champions, and when I allude to that, I mean Bilal Muhammad and Rob Davalishvili. But I think what people are failing to realize is that's just good MMA. That's how you beat, you know, a guy like Sean O'Malley, who's primarily a counter striker. You take away everything that he can do offensively, and that's what Marab was able to do. It was a chess match, and I think that's something that people probably overlooked going in, thinking like, oh, well, Marab is not going to be able to do what he did in every single one of his 10 fight winning streak because of O'Malley's potent power. And as I alluded to in my recap last night, and as well just across the week on social media and elsewhere, I was wrong in saying that I didn't think he was going to be able to do this, and when he did it so easily was just the shocking part. And the way that he nearly finished O'Malley a couple of times was even more shocking because he was in positions we've never seen him in before. So this
Yeah,
was a learning experience, not just for O'Malley, but for Marab as well, because I don't think Marab is going to be able to do that as easily to someone like, an Umar Nurmagomedov or Corey Sandhagen and the like, because I think the bantamweight division is stacked. And this is not to discredit Merab Dvalishvili at all, but he's looking at a major line of contenders where, if you match some of these fights up stylistically, they're bad matchups for Merab, and I think that's the most interesting part looking forward to the future of the division.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, Barab. I mean, in his post-fight interview, he kind of looked a little frozen, being told that Umar Nurmagomedov could be next in line for a title
Yeah,
shot.
actually, Merab followed up on those comments and said that he doesn't think that
He wants
Umar
Figgy.
is next in line. He wants Davis and Figueiredo instead.
Which
Yeah.
Figgy, I mean, we talked about it when Figgy and Umar both won their fights a couple of weeks ago. Credit to Davis and Figueiredo. He really has shown that he is now making bantamweight his home, just like he was when he was dominating the flyweight division. At the same time, I mean, Umar Nurmagomedov has had his own run of dominance without question, and he beat Corey Sandhagen. If Corey Sandhagen had beat Umar Nurmagomedov, we would be talking potentially about Corey Sandhagen being in line for a title shot. So I feel like on that alone, you got to give it to Umar and maybe have Figgy wait on and do another fight before he's considered for a title opportunity. That being said, because of the dominant. And the thing is, I say dominant nature when we talk about Merab nearly finishing Sean Zain, but Sean nearly could have finished Merab in that fifth round with those front kicks, but he didn't have the energy, or he just was like the rest of the fight, unable or unwilling to pull the trigger somehow, which is not O'Malley.
I sort of disagree with you on that front, and I'm going to tell you why. You don't start going for broke with a minute left in the fight. Where was that offense in the prior 20 minutes of that fight that
Well,
made
I
you
agree on that. I agree on that, but the way commentary was talking, I was getting a nervous feeling like, oh my God, are we going to have another 278 like Leon Edwards moment?
Oh no, I mean commentary on the UFC these days is over exaggerated anyway. I mean, they were more frustrated about the way Herb Dean was roughing the fight than anything else.
Which was also bullcrap. Like Herb Dean had, for what Daniel Cormier likes to say about Herb Dean being the best. I mean, just going work, like, and this is the problem that I have. Like, I get it. Maybe he was frustrated, and the fans were frustrated with the way Merab was going. But like you said, that's MMA. And when you're the champion, I remember thinking when I was talking to somebody when Hendricks Lawler 2 was happening, and Hendricks was pinning Lawler against the cage in fourth and fifth round. When you are the champion, you have to put up a performance. Like the challenger, the challenger has to show that he's hungry. But the way Merab was going at it for four or so rounds, as the champion, you have to show some life. And Sean O'Malley just did not do that. So while it was only 48-47 on two of the scorecards, I mean, Zain, the way that fight actually ended up from the eye test, if the likes of Leon Edwards and Chris Cyborg never got rematches, I don't know if you can give Sean O'Malley an immediate rematch, especially because he only had one title defense. I feel like with a stack of challengers, as you're mentioning, with Umar and Figgy, Sandhagen, and all that, I feel the division's got to move on.
Yeah, if the fight was closer, I think a rematch is a possibility, but the fight wasn't that close. O'Malley looked off base. He needs a big fight, but he needs a fight that isn't for a championship. And yeah, I mean it's as simple as that. I mean, unless the UFC wants to go the money route, then they could look at that, but you can't deny what Umar Nurmagomedov has done considering the family legacy that he has. It would just feel like sacrilegious to not give him a title shot at this point, given what he's been able to do. And given, how he looked in his last fight. I saw plenty of people. I don't know if it was us specifically. I don't remember, but I do remember specifically for myself picking Umar. And I remember a lot of pundits saying that Sandhagen was going to be the guy to beat him. And he was the furthest thing from that. So, I mean, I think it just goes to show how much better Umar's gotten. It goes to show how much better the division has gotten as a whole. I mean, this is a talent stacked UFC bantamweight division that I don't think has looked this good in maybe 7 or 8 years. So we're in for a lot of interesting fights into next year, assuming that there's not going to be another bantamweight title fight to close the year out. I don't think there would be. So I'm just going to go on in a limb and say it. I think that Saudi Arabia card in February is going to be headlined by Merab versus Umar or Figueiredo. That's my prediction.
I've got a feeling that that might end up being a co-headliner because I've got a feeling that the UFC is probably still looking at Islam and Sarukian being the headline for Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I more so just been overall, just in
Mm-hmm.
general, I could see this fight being on that card, given that Davos is really in that region. I understand he's Georgian, but I think a lot of people from the Saudi region would go to see that fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's for sure. And one more thing I wanted to mention too. I don't mean to crap on him, but some of the tweets of people who were just ecstatic to see O'Malley lose, I thought were kind of hilarious. Even the one where someone, it was like a meme, and it was like Sean O'Malley fanboys right now, and it was basically like this dude, and he's sitting in his hammock, and he's just furious, and he starts like breaking everything he sees in his sight. And then there was another one. I don't know where somebody found the photo, but there was another one of apparently these people with Sean O'Malley wigs, and it was like a picture of them like before the fight, and they're all there. And then the next picture is a picture like in the middle of the fourth round, and they're all gone. They'd already they'd already left. So
Bandwagoners.
and then somebody else was like, "So is the Sean O'Malley casual fandom gonna die out now? Like, is this
I
over?"
mean, I would hope not. It's only one fight. At the same time, like I said, it was dominated to the point where I wouldn't consider an immediate rematch. And just to end things, I mean, going back to what you said before about, because I saw a couple of tweets, even from some of our own colleagues, saying, that basically we are in the end times or UFC is in the dark ages because people like Marab, people like Bilal Muhammad are UFC champions. Alexa Grasso losing her title, which we'll
I
talk
sort of,
about
I, sor-
next.
I sort of disagree. I mean, you still have
Yeah,
elite.
no, I disagree. I disagree because I was going to have one question, Sam.
Yeah,
Does
go ahead.
everybody forget the dominant run of George St. Pierre when he used his grappling to his expertise and had decision wins, and people still call him one of, if not the goat of MMA. So
I mean, there was a stretch of about 8 years where he didn't have a single win by finish. So,
yeah,
I
so
don't know. I mean,
I think it's a little hypocritical.
I do too, but you have to remember most of the people saying this stuff, it's all recency bias. And most of
Yeah,
these people, when they say these opinions, don't take history into account. Oh, good on you for mentioning that because very few people will. I just want to remind you of that. So
I have sung the praises to of GSP to others when nobody would because, like you said, recency bias and because he's not cool, I guess. That being said, let's go to that co-main event. So the trilogy ends. Valentina Shevchenko regains the women's flyweight title, and Sam, like I said, after what we talked about with the two of us and Pat on Fight Study when we were watching that second fight and talking about the BS of the 10-8 of that 110-8 on one judge's scorecard, you knew Valentina was going to come in with a fire under her. And Alexa Grasso, to her credit, had a couple of submission attempts, tried to recapture the magic of the end of that second fight and what happened in that first fight. But Valentina was ready, and Valentina was basically like, my way or the highway, and she would be damned if she did not walk in, have a dominant Valentina-esque performance, and walk out with the women's flyweight title once again around her waist.
yeah, I mean, this was a classic, Valentina Shevchenko revenge fight. I mean, she had waited a year for this fight, didn't really say a whole lot. From my research and from me covering this fight leading up to it, seemed like she did very little media leading up to this fight. It seems like it was just all business, like doing her obligations that she needed to do. But she was so focused on beating her, it was not even funny. I mean, I had told you as early as May that she was going to win in this fight. I knew that she was going to win that fight the second that the that the majority draw was ruled a year ago. I'm like, Valentine is not going to let this happen again, and she didn't. And it's good for the flyweight division. There's a sense of normalcy again with her as the champion. And this is no disrespect to Alexa Grasso, but Tom, let's be honest here. Is Alexa Grasso going to be the superstar that was going to move the needle for the division? Probably not. This is very similar to, when Holly Holm fought Ronda Rousey and everybody was high on Holly Holm because she beat the consensus like women's pioneer. And then, to be quite honest with you, she's never been the same fighter since. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that Grasso is going to go down that path, but I'm just saying there's some irregularities there, number one. And number two, the options for Shevchenko are endless. She could fight Manon Fiorot, which a lot of people would love to see because Manon Fiorot is arguably going to be the toughest fight of Valentina Shevchenko's career. You still have names like Rose Namajunas out there. You got Aaron Blanchfield. And then, of course, which is Dana's dream fight. He's talked about it for years, the potential for her to finally fight Wei Li after 5 years of waiting could still happen. So
I mean,
there are a lot of possibilities for her now that she's the champion again. All of these fights that people thought were dead maybe a year to 2 years ago are now potentials again.
yeah, and as far as what's next, because like I said, with the same logic, Grasso got dominated 50-45 across the board. This one's done. I would like to, you know, me with EFC Africa alums, Sam. And Manon Fiorot is a former EFC Africa champion like Gondricus Duplessis. I would love to see Manon Fiorot in action against Valentina, getting a title shot, and I think she definitely deserves one after her win against Rose Namajunas. At the same time, like you mentioned, that super fight with Weili Zhang is there. And I have been on the record in the lead up to this fight, San, and saying that, I felt bad that Grasso and Shevchenko were not headlining this card, a Mexican Independence Day card, especially given all that Valentina has done with the UFC. I mean, she has headlined pay-per-views before as the challenger, when she fought Amanda Nunes a couple of times, but never as a defending champion. And I feel like, Weili versus Valentina would be perfect to allow Valentina to, have that role, regardless if it's Valentina challenging for Weili's title and dropping down, or Weili stepping up and most likely and challenging Valentina for her championship. So I kind of, agree with Dana's dream fight in that would be so appetizing to see.
For sure. And I don't think anybody would disagree with you there. The major question now would be, well, Tom, I understand it's a fight night, but if Macau China needs a main event and they need a big one, it could do something very similar to the Noche card where they make a rare title fight a main event on a UFC fight night. I'd be down to see that if they're both 100%. But then again, if you're going to do a super fight like that, it needs to be promoted properly. So maybe a fight
Yeah, they're
night.
going to be too short of time, and I feel.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. I just know that Macau China would go freaking nuts for that if that was ever a possibility.
Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely right. But one, Valentina just fought. Let's give her the time. And number two, we've got Weili Zhang. I would like to see Weili defend. It's a little risky, but given that we have a couple of different options for Valentina, I'd like to see Weili defend her belt one more time, especially given, potentially next in line at long last after all this time would be Tatiana Suarez.
Yeah, assuming she doesn't have to fight another fight beforehand.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. So, yeah, definitely interesting stuff at the top of the card. I'm happy to see that I got this prediction right. A little bummed that I didn't get the O'Malley one right, but I felt relatively confident that Shevchenko by decision was one of the most logical predictions on the whole card, just given what we knew about this rivalry going in. And again, as I alluded to at the beginning of this and elsewhere, I think the pressure to defend her belt in front of her people was too much for Grasso, and sure enough, I was right. So
for sure. And you know what else I thought was pretty logical, Zan, heading into this card? That Diego Lopez would be, would put on a show against Brian Ortega. And He definitely did so. And I mean, just to think about it, Zan, he had that short notice fight for his UFC debut, came up short against Kovalev. And ever since then, Lopez, and even in this fight, he just continues to make statements and continues to impress and improve. It's unreal. And now Diego Lopez, we can legitimately say, based on Brian Ortega's resume, is now a top contender at featherweight.
Yeah, so that's 5 wins in a row at featherweight for Lopez. That's now 3 out of 4 losses for Ortega. 2 guys going in opposite directions, and after being relatively unknown at the beginning of 2023, people know who Diego Lopez is now. And if he doesn't have an invite from the UFC to go to Abu Dhabi to watch Holloway versus Ilya, something's wrong, because I think he deserves the next title shot after that fight is all said and done. I think he's done enough to earn it. He beat a former champion. He's on a 5-fight win streak. He's beat every person in that win streak very impressively and looks better every single time he fights. I think he's a name that if the UFC wants to keep pushing this annual Mexican Independence Day card, he needs to fight for a title relatively soon, because he's a big superstar, or has the potential to be. And I think if the UFC is smart, they should use him as a rocket ship. That's what I think.
I am completely
Now that
for
Carrasco is likely out of the picture, this is the next guy you look at to build that region.
completely, Zan. You're 100% right. I'm just curious, given that Holloway and Superior are going to fight in the main event of 308, do you potentially see them asking Lopez to do one more fight and you give him to Alex Volkanovski?
No, I think they respect Volk as one of the greatest featherweights of all time, and unfortunately, even though you disagree with it, I think they're gonna do what they feel is right and give Volk another crack at a world title fight again, just because he's a bigger name. He's done so much for the division, and he'd probably feel like fighting Lopez is a downgrade from what he's done the last 5-6 years.
Do you think that even if Max wins against Superior?
Yeah, I think so. Unless something dire happens, but this is what I will say: if he doesn't get the next title shot, and there's haywire at featherweight, and let's say Holloway wins or something, and says, screw this, I'm going to vacate the title and move up or move down or whatever he decides to do, because Holloway is one of those guys that pushes for the biggest fights possible.
Mm-hmm.
Lopez fighting in an interim championship fight against Volk might make logical sense, but I think they could use that as a last resort. So,
All right, I understand the point. Also on the main card, Esteban Ribovic, Daniel Zellhuber. I mean, Zan, you know what this fight reminded me of?
tell me, because there's a lot of examples you could use to to um to make this
Well,
fight
you'll know where I'm
similar
going
to
with
fight
this because
that.
you know how much. You'll know where I'm going with this because you know how much I love this fight. Um, Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonner won, where the two just slugged away until from the beginning until the final bell, and both of these guys nearly finished each other in just a wild third round. I mean, hats off to these two, applause to these two. This was fantastic. This was a fight that was needed. I mean, Zan, earlier tonight in the prelims, Joshua Van helped to deliver one of the rounds of the year, a round of the year contender, and then Esteban Ribovic and Daniel Zellhuber had their own round of the year contender, if not at least two round of the year contenders in their fight. Like, this was a fight. You talk about Mexican spirit, Zan. This was a fight that demonstrated that. Ribovic and Zellhuber.
Oh yeah, who knows? I mean, looking at this fight years from now, these two could be legends in the sport of MMA without even us even knowing it yet. And everybody points to this fight as like the birth of these two guys becoming big stars in the region. It was a phenomenal fight. It's a great fight.
It was absolutely, yeah, it was absolutely phenomenal. Hats off to these two. Did you think it topped Gaethje Holloway?
Oh no, not even close. The stakes of of Gaethje Holloway were way bigger. Trust me, if this fight was not on UFC 306 and was placed on a random fight night
Agreed.
at the Apex, no one would remember it. And this is no disrespect to either of these guys. It's just the way the UFC promotional machine works, unfortunately. So, yep.
Agreed, 100%. Also, just to give him his shout out on the main card, Ronaldo Rodriguez, great performance against Ode Osborne. I was worried, Sam, that Ode Osborne was going to get finished, but Ode Osborne managed to hold his own, had Rodriguez in trouble at one point. Hats off to Ode for a hell of an effort. And for Ronaldo, I mean, good stuff, especially on a card like this.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate from an Osborne perspective because what is it now? He's lost, I think, 4 out of his last 5, and he fell to like 4-6 in the UFC. It's a little bit disappointing to see, his fall from grace after such promise a couple of years ago. But for a guy like Rodriguez, this is someone you're supposed to beat. I don't believe in setup fights, but this definitely felt like one. And Rodriguez did what he needed to do, got the job done. Obviously, nearly got finished shockingly a couple of times, but he looked good, and he's definitely a star to look out for in a division that needs newer stars. So this is someone where you could put him on a fight night internationally, potentially headline him in a couple of years after he gets some more wins under his belt. He's someone to look out for in 25, 26, and 27 as someone you could build in the region, for now as like an opening fight on the main card type of fight or headliner on the prelims for maybe 4 or 5 fights in a row. He gets a few more wins, and then you're looking at a fast track to, him fighting top 15 guys moving forward.
Fair enough. All right, so then let's end this with the ultimate question. Similar to what we were talking about with Gaethje and Holloway. Did this card surpass UFC 300 for UFC event of the year? Because I'm going to go first, and I'm going to say no. For as much as the great aesthetic was, and as much as some of those undercard fights, like Ribovich and Zaluber, like Rodriguez Osborne, like Joshua Van, how they really delivered. Ultimately, you know how I feel, Zan, that sometimes your main and co-main really can make or break a show. And unfortunately, I'm not going to say, I completely disagree with our audience. I would say that this was still a great to good card. I would not go into fair, meh, or poor territory, but I definitely think O'Malley's poor performance, the domination of Shevchenko, really did put a little bit of a damper on this card.
I agree, and I'm going to agree with you and say that I don't think it surpassed UFC 300 either. Simply put, that we didn't have the one moment that was frozen in time from a fight perspective. We had tons of promotional elements in the 5-part film that was really good, and all the theatrics and aesthetics that went into making the event what it was. But in terms of one fight moment to pick from that card, unlike UFC 300, I just don't think UFC 306 had it, and I think most people will remember it as being the one and done concert type show from the MSG sphere that had 2 new champions and 1 new champion get her belt back than really anything else. And that, I think, is the disappointing part. Not to mention the fact that I went on UFC Fight Pass earlier, and in some other markets, I'm not going to say which ones to protect them, but in some other markets, they had already uploaded the entire pay-per-view. This pay-per-view, Tom, was almost 5 hours long. So you think about how much we complain about, Riyadh season boxing events being 8 hours long and stuff like that. And as I alluded to before we did this, I got very little sleep last night considering what time the event ended. So I think the length of the show, the break.
No,
I was just going to say the length of the show, the breaks in between fights definitely brought it down for me just a little bit.
Yeah, no, I like, as much as the spectacle was great, the atmosphere is great and stuff. I'm sorry, really unacceptable for a UFC pay-per-view to end 2:15, 2:30 Eastern time in the morning. It just no, absolutely not.
I don't disagree with you. So this was definitely an event to remember. I was glad to be able to briefly chronicle this card with you. Congratulations on going 6-4. You barely squeaked it out. I went 500. Pat, unfortunately, did not do as well going 4-6, which was a rare bad card for him. Unfortunately, he usually kicks our ass most of the time, but yeah, we get a much needed week off from UFC before they take their talents from Las Vegas to Paris for a card that's still being finalized in terms of bout order. But once that card happens, it's a marathon, not a sprint through Thanksgiving, and excited to see what else happens for the remainder of the year. And we have two and news, even though the one and new is familiar with her and new spot. So
Yeah,
I
one and
think,
new and one and once again.
yeah, I don't think the one and once again, in my opinion, I don't know if you agree with me, but I think the one and once again is not going to be losing her belt anytime soon, barring anything super catastrophic. And I'm sure you probably agree with that.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
Probably. All right, quickly before we get out of here. I
I
think I
got
thought I might have lost you for a second, Zan.
I got you.
Okay.
You can keep going.
Quickly before we get out of here. Before we get out of here, just a couple of things. Like I said at the start, don't think we're going to have a full-on episode. That's why we have this. We will have a couple of shorts that will go out this week. Obviously, we'll talk about the Conor McGregor news and what's going on with that, with Michael Chandler now taking a fight at 309. Also, the UFC 309 main event now official with John Jones, Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight championship. And then, of course, as you kind of mentioned, we do have a big boxing championship fight this weekend for the IBF heavyweight title between Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois that we got to talk about.
Yeah, there's that fight. There's the Callum Walsh fight the night before in Ireland. So if you're a boxing fan, next weekend, which is actually the weekend of my 25th birthday, is the weekend for you if you are a hardcore boxing fan. And one other thing that I forgot to mention that I feel is appropriate to mention on here. Oh, a question that I have, Tom. Now that you have seen the promo for UFC 309 on November 16, 2024. Have you started to say your prayers yet that the main event will go off with Oda Hitch this time? Because we were in the same position a year ago. We never got it. Do you think this is the year that we will finally get?
Hold on one second. I'm going to say prayers now. Okay, prayers done.
But in all seriousness, though, does the
You
fight
know
happen?
my feeling. You know my feelings. I'm good with it, but Tom Aspinall better be a mandatory backup. They better be told, hey, this fight falls off again. Aspie's coming in, whether you like it or not.
You're not wrong. For those of you who haven't seen the promo, it's everywhere across social media. We're going to be covering that fight from pillar to post on a very busy weekend. As the night before will feature Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, which means that we are in for a very long fall. I think this is a great. I think that with all that being said, this is a great time to end the live stream. This was an absolute blast.
Zan, just one thing before
go
we
ahead,
go.
sure.
I will say, I know we're talking about McGregor and one of the shorts will release this week, but I definitely think adding Chandler Oliveira too for the Madison Square Garden card, given the whole controversy with Jones Stipe, is an excellent boost to that card.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the hype around that rematch is going to be awesome. It's Michael Chandler's first fight in 2 years back at Madison Square Garden fighting a former champion. You couldn't ask for a better fight. It sucks that it isn't Conor McGregor, but at least Michael Chandler is getting a fight. And hopefully, I don't know if it'll ever become public, but hopefully he was paid a little bit extra for waiting as long as he did. That'll be interesting to see. And you know this as well as I do. If Charles Oliveira can beat Michael Chandler, which I think is a very good possibility, the UFC's future plans for Iron Mike, if you will, could be going up in smoke very, very quickly. So that fight has bigger stakes than I think a lot of people realize. But that's for
sure.
That's for 2 months from now. I'm going to be excited to cover that with you when it occurs. But for now, this stream was a blast, and we get at least a much needed week break, at least from a UFC perspective, because I think after the exhaustion of the anticipation of this event, we all need it. So,
yeah, definitely. All right, that's in. I'm Tom. We'll see you later this week. Like I said, few shorts that'll be dropping from us, talking about McGregor, talking about 309 being finalized, and previewing Joshua versus Dubois this weekend. So we'll see you for all those, and then we'll see you next week for episode 99 of the MMA Outsiders.
Have a good one, everyone, and thank you again for adjusting to the flexible changes of our schedule. We really, really appreciate it. And before you know it, episode 100 will be here. So stay tuned and stay locked in. Have a good one.